And we're really so pleased to have with us this morning Keyvan Geula, a licensed marriage and family therapist from Claremont, California, speaking on the topic of forgiveness and justice, science and religion. Very welcome.
Glad to be here. Sorry for all the interesting complications. So the subject of forgiveness has always been an issue of interest to religion, obviously. But in recent years, science has been become interested in the issue of forgiveness, and for mostly reasons that has to do with mental health and the consequences of it on the physical health. So what happens to people when they hold on to grudges and anger and resentment and jealousy and revenge and all of those things. Basically complicates the whole system of the body. Body and mind have become very much intertwined in the minds of the mental health professionals of all kinds. So no longer they see it as separate entities, but actually as one. So there have been research, there has been clinical work, and good amount of understanding. Stanford was the first place that started to do some work on the whole subject because of the long-term grudges that some people around the world held against another group, such as Northern Ireland and the Palestinians and the Israelis, and started from there. And they invited people from these places to come and to basically work with them to see what happens, and is it possible to convince them outside of the religious context to give up their grudges. And when you look at the body of study in that respect, you see that much of the focus is on understanding the whole concept of anger and basically working through that. And what does it take for someone to let go of their anger? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you, I can use this, right?
Sure.
I'm going to give you a little diagram, which is an interface between the Baha'i concept of understanding of self and the person, and mostly cognitive behavioral therapy, but basically really all aspects of therapy because it uses these components. And what I use is, can you see this kind of faded color? And don't expect a perfect star, so because it's not going to be there. And yes, this is one. So 5 zones of our awareness of ourselves. The way we interact with the world or perceive the world is our sense perception.
Try the black one there.
The sense perception. And then we have, underneath of it, we have our imagination, which is a spiritual power. We know that the guardian Baha'u'llah refers to the senses as our physical powers. And imagination is considered by Abdul-Wahab one of our spiritual powers. And so we have feelings. There's much body of work has been done recent years on feelings related to the face expression, body language, and all those things, especially with the knowledge that we have gained from neuroscience, which is fantastic. And then our intention, or wants, and then actions. So, how many of you are members of the spiritual assemblies here? So you read that prayer at the beginning of the assembly that says that our thoughts, our views, our feelings may become as one reality. Why? What is it that it is supposed to happen? Manifest the spirit of union where? Throughout the world. It's a plural. So really, until and unless an assembly achieves that state of oneness, It is not an assembly. It is a bunch of people sitting together jabbering, you know, or whatever it is that they are. So that entity, that means there is something happens to a divided entity that becomes all of a sudden one. And we know that that happens at the moment of life to the cells of one's body, and that happens, the reverse of it, to the body as we die. It's no longer one because of that spirit is not there anymore. It cannot function. It does not manifest the spirit of union anymore. So science is saying that cognitive behavioral therapy says the world, what we receive, can produce certain amount of feelings in us. And I'll give you a little example, because we need this example in order to understand the whole notion of forgiveness, because forgiveness has to do with finding fault with others and maybe with ourselves. And with the world and the way the world goes around. And so that's really is our reaction to some sort of perception of imperfection as we understand it. So I always use this very simple, very simple example, and that is you're sitting around the room, and then somebody across from you is smiling. And what could be your feeling, perhaps? Happy, and then what do you want to do?
Smile back.
Smile back, and what would be your action? Smile, very good. But then, is it possible that there is another person sitting in the same room looking at the same smile, and then they feel kind of EVGs? Is it possible?
Yes.
Okay, so what is the difference? And that person, what that person wants to do? Basically disconnect. And the way to disconnect is not to look. So we have a device. Disconnect. Now, when we ask ourselves, we say, what is it, the difference between these two experiences of life? The incidents and accidents of life is the same. There's a smile. But then the experience of the person is completely different. So what's the difference? What happened here? The thought. So the thought, which Abdul says it is what? Man's reality is his thought, really, literally. And the whole field of cognitive behavioral therapy, and many of the fields of actually mental health, is after your thoughts. They want you to be able to entertain alternative thoughts. And the more you're able to entertain alternative thoughts, the more you're able to go free from your own self. And basically, you have many windows. Children are the least able to entertain alternative thoughts. They got one, fixated thought, and that's about it. And adults, the more, not just because of their age, but more maturity means more ability to entertain alternative thoughts. When we get fixated on something, that means we are not able to use the windows which are available to us. The writings of the faith, the prayers, the tablets, all of them really are oceans of metaphoric, especially, thought, which are most powerful alternative thoughts to entertain. Because when you entertain a metaphor, you say, in the morning you get up and you say, make my prayer a fire. This is long obligated prayer. It says, make my prayer a fire. So what does the fire do?
Burn away the veil.
The job of this fire that you are summoning is to burn away the veil. So you got veils, or what are those veils? What does those veils veil?
Our thoughts, imaginations,
Well, it says, we use it to the rest of the sentence. It says, make my prayer a fire that will burn away the veils that have shut me out from thy beauty. Basically, we are here to be chasing after his beauty. That is the only object. When something stands in the way of our getting to that beauty, make my prayer a fire that will burn away the veil that have shut me out from thy beauty, and a light that will lead me unto the ocean of thy presence. That's what we are here for. Now, whatever gets in the way of us getting there is a distraction and deprives us of our ability to get to our destination. Basically, forgiveness and not forgiveness, no anger, is about depriving us of our ability to get to the destination. Because Baha'u'llah tells us that your heart is the place of my exactly, and he says, I came in the morning, early in the morning, I don't know, I know it by Persian from memory, but I don't know it in English. Yeah, I came in the morning and I saw you, that there was a stranger. A stranger was in my house, which is your heart. And I just returned. I didn't want to basically stay there. And then Baha'u'llah says, I cried. So the relationship is very interesting. It's really the relationship of a lover and a beloved. He doesn't get angry. He doesn't get, throwing a tantrum or anything like that. He just feels sorry for us. He says, you just bargained me for your anger. You bargained me for your jealousy. You bargained me for wanting to basically hit somebody else on the head. That's all you're about? I'm returning. You be busy with yourself, I'm sorry for you. I feel sorry for you. So, science looks at it, not in that terms, but science understands that when we are in a state of conflict with ourselves, maybe the closest science has come to it, or a bridge between science and religion, is Star Wars. Because Star Wars really brings the concept out really good. By the way, Navajo Nation just recently has decided to translate Star Wars, dub it into Navajo, because they think the Navajos love this film so much. And if they have it dubbed, all their children are going to learn Navajo language. So Star Wars has become the instrument of acculturation and continuation of certain traditions. But I really love Star Wars because people, young and old, can relate to it. That we all have a Darth Vader and a Luke Skywalker in us. So whoever gets fed more, that becomes a dominant character in us. And the job of the manifestation is to really convince us, please let go of your Darth Vader. Don't subject yourself, because even the character of Darth Vader was what? What was his relationship to Luke Skywalker? It was his father, which is what? Metaphorically, a father is supposed to be really nothing but pure heart and interest of the son. But he was basically captive and imprisoned by this dark force. So the dark force was so strong that even deprived him of his ability to love, truly love his son. And we could see the separation. And this anxiety and this war was an inner war of all of us. That Darth Vader within us is going to go for that love that we have for the beloved. And he's going to pull it out of us and will not let us go that way. The light, he will bar us from the light. So, the ability to recognize the thought and be able to ask for alternative thought is when we go to prayer and you say, I need to rearrange my own self. It is not that, I think is the loss of opportunity when we go into prayer, and God forbid we try to remove the difficulty, but we see the difficulty in someone else. Because that is absolutely impossible to do. Because the Guardian says there's only one person in the world we can change, and who is that? Exactly. So why would you anyway want to waste your energy that you have so and time that we have, which is so limited, and go sit in prayer and focus our energy and on somebody else, especially when we are looking for a negative force, which God is never behind it. So Abdul-Baha has a beautiful story. He refers to Rumi, and he says that Rumi it talks about the conversation between God and Moses. So in the Christian tradition, the belief is that Christ is the only messenger of God that does not do sins. they asked Abu Baha, and someone said, question, why do the messengers of God talk about their sins and they lament, you know, Baha'u'llah has the fire tablet, Abu Baha, the tablet of visitation, they refer to their sins a lot. And Abu Baha says, actually the messengers of God they don't have any issue with sins because, the reason is because their thoughts, their self, is only the reflection of the divine will. They have no will of themselves. They have given that will up completely. They have surrendered that will. So basically all they have, maybe the body, but all they have is the will of God. Therefore, the whole concept of sin in terms of them is absolutely illogical. Doesn't exist. And so, but Abu Baha says they do talk about that. They do present that because they want the human beings to learn from their example how to go on the ground and how to become nothing, how to become selfless, how to... did you kill it?
I'm trying, but I'm also thinking, am I supposed to be killing him?
You know, that's the beginning of guilt and forgiveness. If you killed it, you forgive yourself for doing that. If you didn't and you failed, you forgive yourself for the failure. Go free. That's right. Otherwise, the light will basically run somewhere else. So this whole notion of, so the messengers of God talking about that is because of our example. So I'm just going to go over some of the slides very quickly. That the other thing is the notion of love me that I may love thee. That means in the faith we really have the privilege in this cause of being the responsible for taking the first step. If thou lovest me not, he says, my love can in no wise reach thee. Know this, O servant. That means that I give you the will, and I give you the responsibility of making sure that this horse, your will, does not become basically a renegade and go wherever it wants. So you direct it. So the discipline of learning to direct our thoughts basically is taught to us. I really strongly believe in our daily prayer meditation, because we are given this, I love long obligated prayer, we are given this prayer which for all the multitasking that we do today, I think is absolutely necessary for us to slow down our brain and be able to really reflect, because forgiveness requires reflection, an inner reflection. And for that we need to slow down, and brains who get into the habit of multitasking run the whole time. They can't stop for anything. So he says that, yeah, if you don't use your will to come towards me, I can't force myself in. It's just not like you close the windows and pull the shutters. There's no way I can get in, so you need to take that step. Go back to Rumi and says, make me a hollow reed, means I get rid of my own self. Going back to the story of Moses and God, Abdullah says here, God tells Moses, Moses, I want you to pray to God with that tongue that you have not wronged. And so Moses thinks about it, and he says that you have not wronged. You haven't done anything wrong with it. You haven't said anything bad, you haven't made anybody sad, you haven't offended anyone, you haven't lied, you haven't done anything which has been wrong. Moses was very humble. He says, well, I'm sure I've done something. And the reason Moses says that, because we have to remember that we are not aware of everything that we do wrong, because in order to know what we have done wrong, we have to go ask other people, because their perception matters a lot. No, because it does, because the writings of the faith says, beware, beware, lest you offend any heart. That means we have to go ask them, did I offend you? Because I don't know. And then beware, beware, lest ye be offended. So it's basically both ways. the mire and the oil and whatever it is that you have on all over yourself, so you can go free. So Moses says, well, I'm sure I've done something. Somebody might, maybe somewhere, I don't know, be offended by what I have done or not done. Then Abdullah says God gives him a wonderful little trick to use. He says, Moses, then do something. It's about the action. Remember, other people cannot know our intentions. They cannot even know our thoughts. They might get our feelings, but not accurately all the time. But boy, they can get our actions. So he says, Moses, do something. So others are so moved that they pray for you towards God with that tongue that you have not wronged. Abdullah puts the foundation of interdependence, interconnection, and the oneness. And this was in response actually to a woman whose husband was able to go to pilgrimage. Of course, women could not travel. It was all difficult at that time. Mostly men could travel. So she was not able to be there. And Abdullah nature was always to console and always to lift up anyone who felt down. So he writes this tablet to her. He says, you weren't here, your husband is here, and he prayed on your behalf. And guess what? His prayer on your behalf is going to be a lot more powerful than you being here and praying for yourself. And so then he gives her this story. He says, then God told Moses, you do something so someone else on your behalf prays to God with that tongue that you haven't wronged. My goodness, how better, how more can we be given the tools of liberation from our own self, our own worst enemy. We are our own self. He says, not everything we wish is good for us. So many wishes, which is our worst enemy. So even when we want to love someone, which is ourselves, we can be very wrong. And so the issue of the heart is so important to make sure every morning that we get up, we look around the corners of the heart, and there is no traces of sadness, traces of anger, traces of jealousy, traces of why me kind of stuff, because these are clutters all over this house. And a house which is full of clutter, no guest will come up to it. No respectable guest will come. Okay, so I was having fun with that. I don't want to go over this. This is asking the same question Abdullah talks in someone else's question from Muhammad. And Muhammad says that he was basically told that we forgive everybody behind, before you, and after you, so you go free.
You just move it over.
Am I in the way?
No, the
Oh,
screen.
Twist the machine a little bit.
Thank you.
It's sliding up its cradle.
This world can go wrong in many directions. But what I was very fascinated by this passage from Abdullah was his emphasis on why, the reason. He always gives us the reason. You know, like children, you raise children and you tell them, don't touch that. That's half of the thing. The second half is, don't touch that because it's hot and it will burn you. And then the kid knows how the world works, you know. So it says, because the hearts of the people might not be troubled, anxious, and tormented. You see, this is what God wants us not to have any of these barriers in our heart. So for that, He crucified every single messenger of God to go on the cross and to beg for pardon and to basically be an example for us. I have so many beautiful tablets from Abdullah written to individuals when they complain. You haven't answered our letters, you know. It takes 6 months for Salman to take a letter all the way to Holy Land, 6 months for poor Salman to travel on foot back to Iran to take a tablet, right? And Abdullah was sitting in 10 secretaries, literally. 10 secretaries taking notes at the same time. I don't know how he did it. Nobody knows how he did it. And there's, you know, one of the scholars, Mr. Adi, which means scholar, sitting at the presence of Abdullah, and a bag, huge bag of letters come. And Abdullah is sitting there talking to the notables and everything, and at the same time he's answering those letters. How in the world would he answer it otherwise? There would be no time. And he gives one of them to Adib, which is a foremost scholar of Islam. Says, you go answer this for Adib. So Adib goes to his room and he's sitting there and he's writing the answer, throws in the trash. Writing the answer, throws in the trash. In the morning, he's not asleep. He's so tired. The trash is full of stuff. He just feels very overwhelmed. He is not. He goes and sits in the presence of Baha'i Baha'i. Everybody else is sitting there, and the boy looks at him kindly and says, "Adib, did you finish that letter?" And he says, "No, afterwards, don't worry about it. Give it to me." And he just gives it to the man. Okay, send it. That's how he did it. So he gives us the reason. He says, I don't want your hearts to be preoccupied with anything but the love of God. Nothing. And so I'm removing everything. So he goes and he begged him. So people who complain to Abdul Baha doesn't tell him, man, what do you think you are? You're sitting over there in your house. I don't have any house. I don't have any place. I'm a prisoner. Day and night I'm going around, I don't know whether I would be alive the next hour in that condition. And you're complaining that I didn't write to you? Goodness, no, get hold of yourself. He didn't say that. He says, you are right. You are right to complain. You have every right to complain. And then afterwards, he said, but if you could have seen the calluses on my fingers, and the hours as I stay awake, and the way I talk, then you would not be complaining so much. So there is a way that Abdul Baha uses to soften us, just to liberate us from us. It's like talking to the kids, So now this is Baha'u'llah talks about this basically passage really puts all of us to shame and just makes me cry literally. Baha'u'llah says, this servant standeth ready before them, awaiting whatsoever the Almighty has ordained and decreed for us. Nor do I fear any soul, encompassed as we may be by such trials and tribulations as are inflicted by the wicked and the malicious, and surrounded at this hour by a myriad woes and sorrows. Remember, Baha'u'llah refers to people as wicked and malicious, right? So as Baha'is, we cannot be naive, and absolutely mental health does not see that. There are not people who are malicious or wicked. There are. We have people who are narcissistic personalities. They never want to forgive, and they will never beg for forgiveness. Absolutely don't go even after them. They see themselves as omnipotent. They see themselves as the source of the attraction of the universe. They think that if you're not bowing to them and adoring them, they get mad at you. Then don't ever think that you can change everybody just by being nice. That's naive. So, yeah, there are wicked people. And by the way, I have a little bit of type A personality myself, so I read the research that the type A personalities have got a little bit of similarity to the narcissistic. Oh, goodness. So I better kind of watch out. Because they see that research shows that there are traces, similarities, because these personalities get very offended when they are not really acknowledged. So, remembering that, but Baha'u'llah says, then he tells us, he says, Noah's flood is but the measure of the tears I shed. Oh my God. And Abraham's fire, you know the story. You've got to know all these stories to really appreciate this. Abraham, Namrud, the emperor made the fire and put Abraham in there. Well, no, this is not the regular fire, as you can imagine that, yeah? This is metaphoric fire. He put him in there, and I bet Abraham, through his thoughts, was able to turn that fire into a flower garden. Okay. So then he says, Job's grief is but a reflection of my sorrow. So you need to know the story of Job. And Jacob's and Job's affliction are a fraction of my calamity. This really tells us that we really need to know the whole history of religion as much as we can in order to understand where are we standing, on shoulders of who, and how are we going to use all this integrated to our own benefit, to both people. So I know I have 5 minutes, but that's all right. I was not thinking at all that I'm going to be absolutely freeing you from any kind of misunderstanding about forgiveness. I just thought this was a teeny exploration, introduction. The subject is very personal. It's very, I think every human being has had brushes with it. and maybe daily. That's because I know what I do. And so this issue of forgiving ourselves, forgiving others, begging for forgiveness. How do we do it? Science gives you steps and some help, but really the combination has to be both, using science and religion and your knowledge and insights from the writings to really be able to travel this very thorny road and become out free and liberated from all that occupies our hearts and separates us from our beloved. So I stop here and let you ask some questions.
Could you just...
Let's go from this way.
You mentioned a quote from Shoghi Effendi. Do you have a reference for that? Where you said that he says a person can only change one person, and that's ourselves?
I don't have it here by heart. I don't know. You can Google it. You know, Google everything. Or Google or Ocean. There's only one person we can change, and that's ourselves. Yes. And he talks about, there is a wonderful story Lero Iwas shares about the Guardian after he became the Guardian. And the fight that he said he had with himself. And he talks about that. He said, I went to the mountains to fight with myself. And he said, when I spent the whole year to conquer myself. And so when I conquered myself, Shoghi Effendi, I'm just paraphrasing, he said, I turned in Shoghi Effendi, almost like killed him. And the Guardian emerged. And he says that every Baha'i should do that. Every Baha'i has a responsibility of conquering themselves, which means conquering the lower self, because we have these two selves, the spiritual self, and then we have the dark Vader. So conquering it is going after this one and really subjugating it. So the master is that one, which is the writings. This is the writings. This is the hidden words. These are the thoughts that are supposed to be projected over here. And these are the ones that come from our weaknesses and our misunderstanding and our limitations and our humanness. So we really need to keep our eye on that and use the metaphor. I really recommend that when we say prayers, we do get into the metaphors. See the fire. Ask yourself, how big is this fire? What color is this fire? What kind of a... Yeah, what does it do? Because every day your fire might change. You might have a different fire every day, a different look of the fire. What kind of ocean is it? How do you feel when you go in that ocean? Does it feel cool? Does it feel hot? That takes time when you say your long obligated prayer. It's not going to be a 5-10 minute prayer. It's going to take 45 minutes, maybe 1 hour. But boy, we need to slow down because, as I said, multitasking now is coming out after us. Stanford research says people need to really do one task 20 minutes in order to slow down their brain, otherwise the brain just keeps running. And I always, for my young patients who race in the freeways and do all kinds of risky stuff, one of my first remedies is you need to say the long obligated prayers, chant it. Because at least they don't feel guilty when they're doing that. Because all the other things, they say, oh, I need to do this at the same time and I have to do this. Well, I have not seen somebody who wants to say long obligated prayer and wash dishes at the same time.
Sorry, you said 20 minutes, people need to slow down?
They need to, so far, the research is if you're supposed, in order to get grip of your own brain so it's not become a running brain, because the running brain runs all the time in the background, is try, for example, if you're doing emails, don't do it all the time, don't keep it open, just do email 20 minutes and then shut it off. Or whatever task you're doing, at least during the day, do certain things for only 20 minutes, the same task, one task, don't multitask. So you have this ability, because once the brain loses the ability, you can't gain it that easily. And they don't even have enough people who would succeed or who will accept to slow down so they can do the research to see if they can retrieve these brains back.
I'm not understanding what you're saying. What is the purpose of doing it for 20 minutes? What's the benefit?
One task. That means not multitask. You're driving, texting, talking to someone, or students, for example, they are writing a paper, they are listening to the radio, they are texting their friends, they are checking email at the same time.
The reason to do one task is
because that's what they found in research, that 20 minutes is actually the minimum, that you need to be focused in order for you to retrieve the habits that is being.
It's neuroscience, it changes the brain.
Yeah, exactly.
Changes the structure of the brain.
Exactly, exactly.
That's
That's
purpose
the,
is to be healthy, okay.
that's to be able to function with your full capacity instead of minimizing your own abilities and dividing yourself into so many everything shallow. One metaphor I have is, I like it very much, is that if you want to reach water, you can dig 50 wells, each one 2 feet, it will never get to water. You dig one well, 60 feet deep, and you get to water. So really, dig one.
Unfortunately, the industry
Yes.
is going in the opposite direction.
Well,
They just keep throwing more and more at you at
Well, of
once.
course, because that's why we have to make sure that industry does not become our guide. Because they want their pockets, and the Baha'u'llah wants your heart. So don't bargain. Watch out.
And on the same subject, they told me that Abdul Baha said that we have to concentrate in one thing. And he gave the example that if the sun shines in paper, for instance, and nothing happens, but if you hold a magnifying glass, that paper will burn.
Yes, exactly.
So that's why we should concentrate in one thing.
Exactly. And here's another example. He says if you take a little point of a needle and put it on a steel, if you press it, it might make an indentation. But if you take a flat surface and put it on there, there's no impression. So you really need to use this wisdom. Yes.
I'm a little slow this morning. The story of Moses to do one thing so that people pray is to do one really good thing that people pray for you?
He said, Abu Bakr talked about, it's in Rumi's poetry, you can read it. He says, God says to Moses, pray to God with that tongue that you haven't wronged. Because if you have wronged, then your prayer is not going to be accepted because there are barriers. And Moses said, that's impossible condition, because I must have done something. And then God gives him a clue how to resolve this issue. He says, so do something. So I would do something so you would be willing and motivated to pray to God on my behalf and say, God, please forgive Keyvan. You know,
so you would do something kind of bad then. I was thinking
Yes.
Moses do something very good and they're praying for you as a thank you.
No. He said, Moses, you do something
Bad.
for someone, something good.
Good. Oh, okay. That's
Something good, so that that person is motivated to pray to God on your behalf. So God, please forgive her. And they pray for us. So that way, our children, for example, one of the ways we know that in the next world we get a little bit of push forward, is that our children be motivated to pray for us. But our children might, after we are gone, they might not be motivated at all. Because they say, who was she? Like, forget it. And so it is, if God says, love me that I may love thee, that means really our will is supposed to be, we have to choose to love God. We as parents, as friends, as neighbors, as community members, we cannot take it for granted that people are going to be praying for us. So we need to be very aware of our behavior and make sure that we don't lose opportunities of winning people's heart. Abdullah says, it's a lot easier to win God's pleasure, but don't count on other people's pleasure. They got their own hang up, so. Yes and yes.
Well, I'd like to kind of make a comment that there was somebody in my life I resented very badly, and I noticed that that person resided in my head all the time. I mean, it was always there. So I went to a session in San Francisco once that the woman whose daughter had been murdered by the son-in-law had decided that she would forgive him, and she went to him and said, look, you know what you've done, and everyone knows that, but I forgive you. And she said she felt free after that. So I decided, all right, I'll forgive this person who has wronged me. And the moment I did that, it left my head. And it was never there anymore. So I realized that it was causing me illness. And so once I released that, I forgive the person, I was free.
Exactly.
So I think that's really something that is good for the person.
Yes. I have to give a little qualification for what you said, because this is unique to the Baha'i writings. And there is a balance in the Baha'i writings about forgiveness and justice. There's a passage from Abdul Baha says, if somebody done you wrong and injustice, you have no right to forgive them, because the community and the judicial system has the responsibility of justice, and they need to take that burden, because they don't become vengeful, and therefore they don't have this problem of the anger living in their head and being preoccupied and fixated. That would liberate the individual to be merciful. But if the community and the assembly especially, who have the responsibility of justice, they act like individuals and they want to be merciful, then the whole norm and the order and the protection of everyone is at jeopardy. So it is very important for us to realize that the only way as individuals we can be merciful is that we have a society that others take care of that. For example, I give you, if parents sits in the place of protection for children, and if one parent does a violation to the other children, that parent has no permission to forgive. That parent has the responsibility to go after justice, because that is a parent sitting there and responsible for the protection of the children. But Baha'u'llah says, if somebody does something wrong to me, which Zainul Sultan, he says, oh, okay, I'll forgive you. But also remembering that Baha'u'llah says, I swear by my life that I know I will not let go of any justice. So you have to remember that the context you're holding is much bigger than this world, and also that there is this world, justice, the writing says, is more important than mercy. So when you forgive for liberating yourself to love God. But the order of society rests upon justice. So remember that, especially some assembly members need to remember that we are sitting in the place of justice, not mercy. Yes and yes.
I mean, this is what your topic is really about. But I just have a peripheral thing. I just wanted to know what Abraham's fire was. I knew what all those other ones were about.
I would say that you can Google that and research that. That's one of our responsibilities. Yeah, because we need to go find these stories, otherwise the writings would have no meaning to us. Unfortunately, I don't have time. Otherwise, I could give a 5 days, actually I did, 5 days of forgiveness and justice workshop on domestic violence and all those things. You know, I need to give you a lot of stories, but for 45 minutes, I say, go find it.
In the scripture, you see where that God wants us to be repentant before we ask Him for His forgiveness. And by Baha'i standards, are we supposed to, or can we forgive people while they're still beating us, or while they're still inflicting upon us, and while it's still happening? Do you forgive them, or do you wait till they stop doing what they're doing?
Actually, that's what Abdul Baha says. You cannot forgive them. You need to make sure that it is that there is protection and there is justice, and that's why you refer to the authorities. You go to the spiritual assembly, you go to the judges, you go to the judicial system, you go to the police, you call 911, you do whatever it is that it takes. That person does not repeat offending and inflicting upon society, which you are a member of it, and they basically get away with it. So that absolutely is important.
The beating is a metaphor, because we've all been beaten some way or another. If we have to forgive somebody, they've done something to wrong us. I'm talking about if they continue to wrong you, it may not be something you can call the authorities about.
Well, you need to find ways to protect yourself, and that includes, because science and religion and the Baha'i faith are really coming from the same source, they need to be in harmony, and they are. So you have to find ways to make sure that you're safe. You go to the therapist, you pray, you research, you find ways, you learn exercises to liberate yourself, basically to take yourself to a different level. You don't subject yourself to the person, you set boundaries properly so that person is not sitting in your proximity. People change jobs when bosses do stuff that they cannot tolerate. Sometimes the fact that we feel very uncomfortable or beaten up or whatever by another person is there is something that is not just what they're doing, but also what we contribute to it. And especially science and mental health will help people to look and see what is their contribution. And I like to refer you to a very good book in this respect. She's done wonderful work. Janis Abrahms Springs is the PhD, who's done years and years of work in forgiveness, and a lot of it on affairs in the marriages. So I would say that, and Luskin of Stanford, he's done some work on that. So definitely, we do not, if I feel beaten up by someone, I want to know what is it about me that I can strengthen so I can protect myself and set the boundaries properly so I won't be the victim. Because being in a victim position is very dangerous. What makes you feel justified is to be the villain. And so
what are the books you said? Janis Abrahms Springs?
Janis Abrahms Springs.
That's
The name of the Springs? or-
That's Fred Luskin is the other one.
Fred Luskin, are they co-authors?
No. These are two completely
Two
different
books?
two different books, two different schools of looking at the issue. Janis is more of a clinician, and Fred Luskin is more of a researcher at Stanford. There's Fred Luskin. I don't have Janis's book with me. Janis Abrahms Springs is her name, and How Do I Forgive You? She's written several books. I was actually at the Marriage Family Couples Conference, and she spoke excellent. And she's had some really heavy stuff to forgive herself. So it's good.
That's the title of the
I was
book,
just
How Do I
gonna-
Forgive You?
Last.
Okay, I was just gonna quickly say there's an excellent movie about this very topic called The Power of Forgiveness. You can see through Netflix and others that talks about interviews with, people in Ireland and people in the Middle East, exactly what you're talking about.
That's the Stanford people.
Yeah, so the Stanford people, so.
Well, I'm sure this is a subject that will be around until we're around. So, and thank you so much for your work.